If Episode 1 of Season 6 was about setting up plot lines, Episode 2 is all about big revelations. Bran's visions, Tyrion talking to dragons, and Jon Snow. Hi everyone, this is Robert. Welcome to In Deep Geek, particularly if you're a first-time viewer. Please do consider subscribing if you enjoy the video. This is an explanation of Season 6, Episode 2 of Game of Thrones. Home, in the light of all we now know. I'll pick out the areas of foreshadowing and hints of what is to come, as well as explaining what was really going on at the time. Obviously, if you haven't caught up to the end of Season 6, then be wary of spoilers. First up, we get the return of Bran. We didn't see him for the entirety of Season 5, a gap that the showrunners equated to what happened to Luke Skywalker between The Empire Strikes Back and Return of the Jedi. Bran has been training under the supervision of the Three-Eyed Raven. So when we see him now, perhaps a year or more has gone by, and he is a lot more powerful, even if his power is not yet matched by control, wisdom or experience. Before getting into the details of Bran's visions, it's worth taking a second to consider their role in the show. In the books, the weirwood visions seem to be limited to what weirwood trees can actually see near them. But on the show, Bran can seemingly travel anywhere, at any time, see it from any angle, and as we'll see later, interact with it. This is, I think, just a shortcut on the showrunner's part. There is a lot of backstory to cover in Game of Thrones, and Bran's visions are a good way of covering it all. Bran's first vision is of Winterfell. He sees his father and Benjen as young boys, as well as Lyanna, who, it is clear, is a skilled horsewoman and fighter even at her young age. He also sees old Nan, who is still quite old, and a stable boy called Willis, who is evidently Hodor as a youth, and he can talk. This is a huge mystery. What happened to Hodor? We'll find out in only a few episodes' time. Unsurprisingly, Bran wants to stay, to learn more, to see again the home he grew up in and the father he lost. But the Three-Eyed Raven pulls him out. This shows us both Bran's desire to explore his new powers, even beyond the safe confines of his teaching, and the Three-Eyed Raven's fears for what Bran might do with his powers. We'll see this fear again in later episodes, and it isn't completely explained. Does the Three-Eyed Raven know what Bran is capable of in interacting with his visions? Or that he will do something terrible? Or is he nervous because of something he did in the past? Whatever the reason, the Three-Eyed Raven doesn't do a very good job of explaining it to Bran. In fact, he doesn't explain it at all, and so Bran is completely unaware of what he can do in the visions. Perhaps if the Three-Eyed Raven had explained, we would have been spared this, and this, and this. There's also a touching moment with Mira. She has left her home and her family and has seen her brother killed before her eyes, simply to get Bran to the Three-Eyed Raven. And now she's lonely and in limbo. For a year or more she's just been stuck there, waiting and grieving for Jojen. Leaf tells her that Bran will need her when he leaves the cave, which will prove to be true. And it's an interesting hint that Bran will need to be physically elsewhere as part of the children's plan. Which is odd, given that Bran seems to be able to interact with events anywhere and at any time from the Three-Eyed Raven's cave. Where might he need to be? And why? Winterfell? The Isle of Faces? Or is this just that Leaf knows that eventually the Night King will be able to break down the magical barriers, and Bran will need to flee the cave? Like a lot of Bran's plotline, it still isn't clear. In King's Landing, we have a series of quick vignettes that don't really advance the plot, but they do show us quite clearly where the power lies at the start of Season 6. We have a quick sight of the new zombie mountain going about his business, killing someone who badmouthed Cersei. Tommen bans his mother from going to the Great Sept for Myrcella's funeral because he's worried that she will be arrested again by the Faith Militant. But then he immediately apologizes to Cersei and asks her to teach him how to be a strong ruler. And finally, Jaime confronts the High Sparrow, but is forced to back down when the Faith Militant appear. All of which shows us how weak Tommen is as king, beholden to both the High Sparrow and his own mother. And that although the Lannisters may have hold of the Red Keep, the Faith Militant are unassailable in the Great Sept. The rest of King's Landing is an ever-shifting ground of mixed loyalties and, let's not forget, a massive population of people just trying to go about their lives. Something will have to give. In Meereen, Tyrion and Varys are still facing problems in Daenerys' absence. First up, there is news that the slave masters have retaken Yunkai and Astapor. This is yet more evidence that Dany is a conqueror, but not a ruler. She takes control of cities, but she doesn't set up governance systems that will last. In her absence, Yunkai and Astapor have just relapsed into their former positions. And Meereen? Well, we saw last episode that she left Meereen in really quite a bad shape, with people starving on the streets and an ongoing violent rebellion against her rule. But the more pressing issue is that she has left 2 dragons, Rhaegal and Viserion, chained up underground with no food. And understandably, no one dares approach them. Except Tyrion now does, and they don't eat him. In fact, he seems to get on reasonably well with them. He tells them a story about how he used to dream of dragons as a child, then releases them from their chains before making his exit. Now there are 2 points here. First, the show is deliberately mirroring a scene from the books where a character called Quentyn Martell tries to free these 2 dragons, and they don't take too kindly to him. The juxtaposition with that incident is striking. Second, the question has to be asked, why did the dragons seem to like Tyrion? Now the straightforward answer is that they are clever animals, and they could see he wasn't a threat, and they worked out that he was there to free them from their chains. This is entirely possible. But it also opens up the possibility that they sense something about him. A hint of Targaryen blood, perhaps? I don't have time to go into the theory in any detail here. I've done that in another video if you want to check it out. But there are hints, particularly in the books, but also some in the show, like this, that Tyrion could be the Mad King Aerys' son. If so, perhaps the dragons could sense that he was half Targaryen. It's not made clear, and I fear it won't be. I suspect that the showrunners are content with there being just one secret Targaryen on the show, and this incident was just a nod to the fans. In Braavos, the waif is still beating up blind Arya, this time accompanied by a demand to know Arya's name. Arya dutifully says, "No one," but the waif is not convinced she means it. However, Jaqen appears, and he does seem satisfied. So Arya is back in the fold and is led back to the House of Black and White. This, I have to say, seems a little odd, like all of Arya's dealings with the Faceless Men. She failed in her training last season, and the waif doesn't think she passes this test, but Arya progresses nonetheless. So, what's really going on? Perhaps we will understand better in Season 7. At Winterfell, Roose Bolton learns that his wife has given birth to a son. Ramsay, predictably, sees this as a threat to him and calmly kills his own father, and his stepmother, and his newborn baby stepbrother. If we didn't know before that Ramsay was a bad guy, then we certainly do now. And the upshot is that Ramsay is now in control of Winterfell, and because some of the other northern houses have sworn fealty to the Boltons, the North as a whole. And he immediately turns his attention to how to get rid of what he probably thinks of as his last remaining threat, Jon Snow in Castle Black. We then turn our attention to the Iron Islands. Theon decides he wants to return there as his journey of redemption continues, but we don't see his arrival for another couple of episodes. What we do see is an even more dramatic return. Now, this is actually our first view of the Iron Islands since Season 3, and at first it seems as if nothing has changed. Balon Greyjoy is still in control and still pursuing his ambitious war against the mainland, despite having lost all of the ground he had previously gained. The rest of the world has moved on, and Yara is trying to make him see reason, but Balon seems to still be fighting the War of the Five Kings from his throne room in Pike. This all changes when he steps out onto one of the rope bridges that connect the towers of Pike. Standing at the other end is Euron, his estranged brother. Now, this is Euron's first appearance on the show, but he's a massive character in the books. Charismatic, bold, and completely insane. He was banished from Pike for raping his brother's wife and has spent the last few years on a series of barely believable piratical adventures. And now he has returned, giving a speech that shows that the reports of his megalomania were, if anything, understating the truth of it. He claims that he is the storm, that he is the drowned god. And then he kills Balon, watching him fall from the rope bridge to the rocks below. Incidentally, there's a link here to what Jon says in the trailer for Season 7. He says, "The true enemy won't wait out the storm. He brings the storm." Is there a hint here that Euron is the true enemy? I'll let you decide. Another thing that the viewers are left to decide for themselves is whether Melisandre has anything to do with Balon's death. Back in Season 3, she leached blood from Gendry. Powerful blood, she claimed, for Gendry is King Robert's son, and she burned the 3 leeches with his blood in it, calling for the deaths of Robb Stark, who died later in Season 3, Joffrey Baratheon, who died in Season 4, and Balon Greyjoy. So all 3 of those she condemned to death died. Was this powerful blood magic, or just evidence that Westeros is a dangerous place for pretenders to the throne? We are left to decide for ourselves. The upshot of Balon's death is that there will be a Kingsmoot to choose a new leader, for it would appear that the Iron Islands actually have a slightly more egalitarian means of choosing their ruler, by popular acclaim. And there are 3 possible claimants: Theon, Balon's disgraced eldest son, Yara, his chosen heir, and Euron, Balon's crazed but brilliant brother. At the Wall, Davos and the Loyalist Night's Watch are still holed up in the room with Jon Snow's body. Alliser Thorne is about to break into the room when Ed returns with the wildlings and our heroes are rescued. Alliser Thorne and his co-conspirators are led off to the ice cells. Now, this is a slightly controversial point, but although we might not agree with Alliser Thorne's methods in getting rid of Jon, it's hard to disagree with his reasoning. For centuries, the Lord Commander of the Night's Watch had been focused on keeping the wildlings north of the Wall. Jon Snow had, in just a year or so, let an army of wildlings pass through the Wall, put Night's Watchmen into danger to try and rescue more wildlings, and now, as a result, Castle Black itself is under the control of wildlings, who are killing Night's Watchmen without any reprisals. We may not agree with Alliser Thorne, and he is almost certainly on the wrong side of Westerosi history, but he had a point. As George R.R. Martin says, everyone is a hero in their own story. Not that we get to dwell on this thought for long, because our attention is immediately taken back to Jon Snow's dead body. Davos urges Melisandre to do something, to bring Jon back from the dead. The most striking thing about what follows is the total lack of manufactured drama. Previously, Melisandre had been all about the spectacle, burning statues of the Seven on the beach at Dragonstone, or gathering the army to watch the sacrifice of Shireen. This time, probably because of her crisis of faith, she does almost nothing, just cutting Jon's hair and cleaning his body, and appears unsurprised when nothing happens immediately. But something does happen. Jon, like Beric Dondarrion before him, returns from the dead, and we'll look at the implications of that next week. What do you think? Do you have any questions or unresolved issues about this episode? What struck you as important? Let me know in the comments below. Thanks for watching. If you like this video, please do consider subscribing. And if you want to support the channel or get access to more of my content, please check out my Patreon page. Thanks again. That's all for this time. I'll see you again soon.